Hi, everybody. So, my diagnosis for the disability simulation was a left CVA with hemianopsia, short term memory loss, and a mild cognitive impairment. And the adaptive equipment I was given for this simulation was the goggles with half of the lens blocked out for the hemianopsia and a straight cane. So, one thing I learned from this experience that I think will help me be a better clinician was that I learned how important it was to address psychosocial and self esteem issues because this is something I really experienced a lot, especially with these glasses. And I'll talk a little bit more about that further on in my discussion. I also learned how important it is to address community access and mobility. These things are so important. It's one thing to talk about them in class, and it's another to actually go out and experience them. So I was very thankful that we were given this opportunity and provided with the equipment to do so. It was really intimidating going out into the community with surrounded by other people, knowing that I couldn't do half of the things I was capable of doing a few days prior. And I think it'll help me be a better clinician because it'll give me a better idea of what to focus on for OT interventions if I ever were to interact with a client with, hemianopsia and a left CVA, potentially working with short-term memory loss and a mild cognitive impairment, which is kind of hard to simulate, but I tried my best, especially during the meal prep activity. Some of the psychosocial aspects that stood out to me. I actually had a really embarrassing experience in a restaurant. When I was ordering my meal, the waiter did a double take when he noticed the goggles, the blacked out goggles. Here, I'll put them on. But you couldn't tell what he was thinking when he kind of like did his double take. And honestly, I probably would have done the same thing if I were in his position because I've never seen somebody wearing one of these before. Like you see somebody wearing a wheelchair or in a wheelchair, you see somebody using a cane, but I've never and probably will never see anybody wearing something like this. So yeah, when the waiter came up to take my order and ask me what I wanted, I kind of like noticed that he did a double take and I tried to avoid eye contact. So it was really, really kind of an off-putting experience when I was out at the restaurant. And when that happened, it felt like I needed to explain what I was doing, which I think is really sad because there should be no need for me to have to explain something like that. And I think other people who do have these disabilities feel like they do need to have an explanation, but they don't have one. Like this is real for them and it happened to them. So I think addressing those psychosocial impacts is really important. We talked about that in adult last year with amputees, but we never really talked about it as in depth as we did for people who have had amputations. We didn't really discuss what that would look like addressing for somebody who had a stroke. So I think it was really important and eye-opening to do something like this with a diagnosis where we didn't really stress those aspects as much. One gen ed course that really helped me complete this assignment was I took a dance class my sophomore year, and at that point I really hadn't taken any core OT classes. And what helped me out about it was that we had to perform these different dances in different locations on campus, and we had to use the environment in our dance. So I think it taught me how to interact with the environment in a bunch of different ways, and it taught me to identify challenges in the environment. So we may be like we're using stairs or a ramp, and incorporating our movement into that environment. So I think if I had to pick a gen ed class, it would definitely be dance because we took that aspect into account. For a major related course, I would definitely build off of my adult community application course last semester. Just knowing how to go up and down stairs with a cane. I had to relearn that again, but that was pretty quick because I pulled a lot of that information from adult last semester. Just knowing which side the cane goes on when you have a left CVA. And this is also the class where I learned most of the signs and symptoms of a stroke. So that was really helpful to me. One of the things that was most challenging for me was wearing the glasses. Honestly, I couldn't save them. I couldn't keep them on my face longer than 5 hours to save my life. They really bothered my eyes and gave me a headache after a while. And one thing that I did struggle with was that I don't know if the simulation gave an accurate portrayal of what it would be like to actually have hemianopsia. Because I know we mentioned in adult that when somebody has this condition, they don't really notice. Their brain doesn't tell them that something is wrong or off. They just have it cut in that visual field. And it's hard for them to get past and to work through because they aren't even aware of it. So with something like this, you're very, very aware of it. So I don't know if that was quite an accurate portrayal, but that was definitely what was most challenging for me. Especially when I was a passenger in the car. I didn't dare drive because if I put them on again, if I were to drive, my eyes can compensate for this. I can see everything in my field of vision right here because my right compensates for it, but my left eye can't compensate for this field vision loss. So I wouldn't be able to see a car that was coming in from the right side. So I definitely thought that was really, really interesting to see when I was in the car. What it was like going into the community with my disability. Thinking about client with the physical limitations I experienced. So the type of training that they'll need and the training that I had to reteach myself was how to use the cane appropriately when I was out in the community. They'll also need to know how to weight bear when getting in and out of the car. I had to go over that and relearn that again. We'll have to teach them how to shower and to get in and out of bed appropriately. We'll have to teach them how to move around their environment using the cane. That's critical. Otherwise, you risk the possibility of them falling if they're going up and down the stairs incorrectly. Talking a little bit about the items I chose to make for my meal. So I chose to do chicken piccata, which is just like a lemon chicken, and make it over a bed of pasta, and I made a vegetable, green beans, to go along with it. The hardest part about this process was definitely getting everything out of the grocery store. The glasses made it really hard for me to locate ingredients because I'll be looking around and I would completely miss something that was right in front of me. And I felt like I had no spatial awareness of the people who are around me. I felt like I had to go way around them in order to even walk past them because I didn't feel comfortable with my spatial awareness, my closeness to them. The cane made it really difficult to hold a basket with all of my ingredients, so I had my helper hold that for me. And like I mentioned before, there's no way I would be able to drive safely with the glasses on, so I had to have somebody help me get to the store. Cooking and eating the food was much more manageable. I was technically supposed to have short-term memory impairments, which is hard to simulate for making a meal, but one thing I did try to do to kind of simulate that was saying, like, reading off the recipe. Okay, if I read it visually, maybe I didn't capture or remember the measurements correctly, so I had my partner read off the ingredients so I could hear it and I could see it, and maybe that would help me compensate for that impairment. I didn't use a whole lot of adaptive equipment other than the glasses and the straight cane for cooking and preparing my meal. But I did do some research into ocular prisms, which are basically like these glasses that shift the affected sections of my visual field over the part of the retina that is still functioning correctly. And the goal of wearing these glasses is to increase your field of vision. It slowly kind of compensates over time, which I thought was pretty cool. I'd never heard of them. So if I did have an additional pair of adaptive equipment, I would definitely want these ocular prisms. I hadn't heard of them before. So my group theory that we were given was occupational adaptation, and my personal theory that I was provided was sensory integration, which is great for me because I had a stroke and I had the hemianopsia that I had to do, work with. So just a brief recap on the two. Sensory integration was looking at how individuals categorize the stimuli in their environment, and occupational adaptation theory looks at the person, the environment, and the interaction between the two. Some similarities between the two, between OA and sensory integration. Both theories are looking at how an individual interacts with their environment, obviously. The difference is, specifically the SI, it takes a much more neurological, sciencey based approach to understanding the individual than occupational adaptation theory. The occupational adaptation is really going to look at how the person moves as compared to SI, which may describe why the person moves that way. So when evaluating the needs of a client with hemianopsia, I would need to know what their home environment looked like, what some of their supports were, whether that be personal or environmental. And I need to have an idea of what goals they have for themselves and what that would look like in intervention, so that I know what they need to target as well as what I'm seeing when I'm observing them. If I were to design a program, I think a lot of sessions would either be in the home or in a community setting because that's where I struggled the most, rather than in a clinic. It's easier to, I would choose these locations because it's easier to generalize skills learned in them, um, specifically in the community and in the home. It's easier to apply the things that I teach my patients to those locations. And patient safety would be obviously of utmost priority during these outings. One thing that would make the assignment even better for students in the future. So one thing I did think of right off the bat were with the goggles, maybe using like a clear, not a clear tape, but like one that kind of clouded your vision instead of completely blacking it out. As I said before, this really messed up my eyes and gave me a headache after wearing it for the first day. And hemianopsia is really tough to simulate. So I think if we use the clear tape, it may be like less, I may be less aware of me losing that whole half. I think that may simulate it a little better. And as I mentioned before, a person with CVA isn't aware that they're missing parts of their visual field. It's something that they don't notice and they don't realize about themselves. And as I mentioned before, while it's somewhat normal to see somebody wearing a cane or using a cane, being in a wheelchair in public, I thought wearing the goggles was a little unrealistic and it made me kind of uncomfortable wearing them. So I think the clear tape could be a really, really beneficial part to add to that. I don't know if it would work quite as well, but that would be my only suggestion for this project. But other than that, I had a really eye-opening experience with it. So thank you for making this a part of the curriculum.